All right, so continuing with the full cycle, as you guys know, we just went over this right here as a very, very quick recap. So don't try to skip, but as a very quick recap, the cycle is right here, which you should have written down. And we ended out right about here, where we basically said, okay, a major flush is likely in order. It's clearly going through a major flush, which would likely lead to a worthless market or a non-important market, or, as I drew here, a brand new stage one that starts a stage two that goes into the brand new cycle of a full cycle. So funny enough, because this is the reason I'm using this as a specific example is one, because I know it went well, but two, because I actually traded it myself. So now we look at this right here. Now this picks up, if you notice, right around here, which was this area right here. So if we follow what's going on here, this is where we assumed what we said to be the major flush. There it is. Then price came up and started coming down lower. So price came up and started coming down lower, and we assumed in this image, based on the full cycle or the basic cycle, that we were going through an MF, a major flush. Now, similarly, that's exactly what this price continued to do. Price dropped off under all these moving averages into this major flush. And from there, very simply, we assumed that this stage one is likely coming to an end and a new stage one or a new full cycle may start. So again, this cycle here likely ended through these major. And again, as price comes down, we start assuming that maybe a new one begins, or it falls off and becomes a useless market. Maybe it starts chopping around, going crazy, and it becomes not worth watching. But instead, through these major flushes, a new stage one began to get built. And funny enough, within stage ones, as they get built, actually, before we talk about that, within this buildup, right, we, of course, through the major flush, had breakdowns, whether you use the Mentafx indicator to see that there was a breakdown, or you just basically use any lows, or any lows. We had the anticipation of the higher low rule met. So again, it doesn't matter where you really draw this, but anticipation of the higher low is met through the major flush. So major flush begins to set up the principles for a potential accumulation. Doesn't guarantee it, but we understand what we're waiting for and looking for because it's a trend template. So anticipation of the higher low is met through this major flush, but we don't know when accumulation is truly met. We know now, in hindsight or after the fact, that this was what we call accumulation, right? Similarly to what we saw back here, we understand this was accumulation at this low once price had begun to prove and put in mini stage ones and twos that made up a larger stage one. And as a result, we had MBs that formed from it. Similarly, as this price action is being created, we don't know that this is an accumulation. But then we start to understand that we are likely in accumulation as a stage one begins to form, a larger stage one begins to form through minor stage ones and stage twos as they begin to deliver. So as this happens, we understand that the major flush plus the anticipation of the higher low is leading to a new start of a potential full cycle as accumulation is now met. So here we have accumulation through the anticipation of the higher low rule. We have the stage one built, and from that comes the stage two very easily. And again, within all of that, start the formations of MBs, all of which can and are tradable based on your specific rules of how the potential pullback looks or how the MB looks. But again, these are MBs and they are forming. And you get new mini flush outs. So again, within these stage ones and twos, you have minor flush outs. Let's do it in purple. You have minor flush outs that lead to an overall delivery of that stage two or fractal stage ones and twos made up of new, as you would all guess, tradable MBs and multiple of them, as you can see right here, right? Now price takes off in those stage ones and twos. Then very simply, you can see the next kind of fractal stage one into potential stage two fails. So this is one of the examples where you actually don't get, it's a fail, but also a flush, right? You get a normal F because stage ones and twos are delivering. So at this point, we're in this point of the cycle right here, right? We've gone through a major flush. We've gone through stage one through accumulation, stage two delivery, and now we're flushing out to create, likely, continuations or repetitions in stage one and two, and fractal stage ones and twos until the next potential failure. So very simply from this flush comes, as you would all guess, because a flush creates stage ones, a larger stage one. So that's stage one into stage two, into stage one, into stage two, into another stage one, right? That's created by another mini flush. And again, all of these are created by minor ones and twos, and ones and twos. And similarly, those ones and twos, the fractal ones, And the fact that it's happening within a larger stage one creates or sets the precedent for MBs to get created, MBs become validated, MBs get created, MBs become validated, MBs get created through the fractals as well. And as I spoke about in the last example, because again, as we do these, I want you to start embedding in your mind what a potential entry can and will look like for a lot of you. I want you to remember that in some cases, this is someone's edge right here. Their entire system could be as simple as entering through here, throwing their stop somewhere under, okay, within the MB or under the MB, depending on what their system is, and their entire profit gets taken off maybe for half here, and the rest gets trailed with a low, and maybe gets taken out here. And that could be their whole system. And again, a trader who is consistent in what he does and has grown his account that puts $10,000 of risk, for instance, on this trade right here, this is a gain of probably around $11,000 or $12,000 just off of that. And some people's edges are as simple as letting a move start, letting a move play out, letting MBs get built up. Those MBs start those fractal stage ones and twos, and on the next fractal stage one, they enter through the MB because the fractal stage ones and twos are representations of MBs, which again validate demand and then hopefully start a move. Okay, so remember, those are all still opportunities for entries depending on the system you're trading. Now, personally, at the moment, this is not something that I would be trading, but again, this doesn't matter because there are not infinite, but there's a very high proportion of members and people that I've taught, that I've mentored, that have proven themselves, shown me the results and whatnot, and do phenomenally for themselves with just small setups like that. Nonetheless, we get another little flush out here, and that leads to, once again, fractal stage ones and twos, or the validation of an MB, followed by the validation of an MB, followed by, within that, new little MBs, if those are the ones you end up trading based on what your rules are, right? New MBs, all these act as MBs inside of this area. These are all opportunities. And even as price comes out of that, you can see another little MB gets built right here. So again, some of you may not trade an MB this size or this small or one that looks like this, but nonetheless, it's still an MB happening as a stage one is formed through the flush, and then off starts a move. And again, I want to draw your attention to one specific moment. This right here, don't forget, as I said before, is an entry for some people. And again, they will enter their trade. Their stop will probably be around this size, just keeping it consistent. Maybe this is around 10K in risk. Price goes, and that could be a 10K gainer just off of that. Or in some cases, right, let's say their stop loss was bigger and they were looking for a 1-to-1 risk to reward where it's the same reward for what they risked. This, at this point on this candle, might have been a move where they moved their stop to the entry, and simply this move, which doesn't seem to do anything or even seems to fail, becomes a gain of, as I said before in some of our examples, of $0, which means they don't lose anything for taking on the risk. And again, I show you this because I want you to get consistent and understand that if you understand where you are in a cycle of delivery, right, stage one, stage two, stage one, stage two, stage one, stage two, stage one, expecting the stage two, right, and they enter through that. If you understand where you are in a general cycle of delivery in reference to where you are in potentially a larger cycle of delivery, your system can be as simple as entering through a higher based MB or momentum based MB. You can take note as one of these entries where it's a higher MB as a momentum based MB, because it's one that's happening after the move is basically started and it's now being created off the momentum, right? So we will cover entries later. I'm taking a note on that right now because I will want to cover it with you guys, but that would be a momentum based MB type of entry. And then, that could be your mini profit. And you have multiple of these examples throughout, right? You have tiny little examples like that. 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 And don't forget, these small setups, these quick-based setups, these momentum-based MB setups are indeed setups that are very profitable based on the person you are and the kind of system you want to build for yourself. So don't forget that. And beautifully enough, as you start to recognize what kind of entries make the most sense for you, so it could be the larger stage one based MBs coming out of the moving averages, or the ones that have now come out, started to prove themselves, and then you enter off the fractals and off the quicker ones, and you take your partials and your profits quicker, and you close your break evens, or you manage them quicker. Based on the kind of system you're going to be following, you're also going to have specific rules around filtering for stocks, for cryptos, for Forex, for futures that meet that criteria, which is what you're basically learning to do. You're gaining an intro to the overall template of a move so that you understand in which moments you make the most money, so you can start to understand when it's time to trade a given market, right? So just remember that. Now, funny enough, as we look at this, I'm going to get rid of all these and look at all these MBs. My personal entry that I actually took was this one right here. So I actually bought right here. I had my stop loss around here. And this is the move I personally took. I actually think I got into it. Yeah, so I got into this. And then around this point, I'd moved my risk to break even. So again, my risk got moved here because I assumed, right, down move, up move, assuming this was some kind of closure up here, validating demand, price should not come back to that point. And you can see it never did. It can get close. Yes, it can, but it never did. So this is the move I personally actually took in my own trading. Entered off of the exact same thing. Entered off of the fact that a new full cycle is starting. You had a major flush, followed by the anticipation of the higher low rule, followed by the buildup of a stage one, which proved that this was likely now accumulation, since we don't know it's accumulation until that stage one happens. As that happened, fractal stage ones and twos were built through MBs, and MBs becoming validated or MBs beginning to form. Those MBs created, again, new stage ones and twos, which led to normal flush outs, which led to new MBs, which led to flush outs, which led to MBs that to me were enough to take an entry. And those are the entries I personally traded. And I'm going to show you that personal trade right now. So here we are. We move left here. So there you are. This is the personal MB I traded off of. Right through that high, price never came back. And this went on a very, very beautiful, beautiful runner. Okay, absolutely beautiful. And that's exactly how trends deliver. Now, here we are. Now, as we head back here, let's continue moving through the actual full cycle, right? Price then goes into, and again, please remember that, I'm not going to draw every single one, but all of these act as the fractal stage ones and twos, stage ones and twos, fractal stage ones and twos. And if you start understanding that you make the most money through the delivery or higher delivery of fractal stage ones and twos, those are the ones you end up trading, right? Then price goes through another flush, right? And that flush, once again, creates a new stage one. That stage one is then further supported and created through MBs. MBs begin to get created, MBs begin to get created, and those create opportunities for a runner because those start creating small stage ones into twos, stage ones into twos, and all of a sudden you start getting minor stage ones into twos, stage ones into twos. And beautifully enough, this is an example potentially right here of a trade where if you're taking an MB through a higher point, right, like something like this is an example of where you might be taking a loss because you'd probably be entering around here. Your stop would probably be around here. And as you get in, there's not really enough time. Well, maybe there is based on your rules, but maybe on this candle, as it starts going, you move your stop loss to break even, and then you actually take a plus or minus $0 on this account, on this trade. Or in other cases, based on your management, you might get stopped out for your negative 10K. Because again, I want you to remember that whether you trade a quick base system or a longer base system, no matter what system you trade, losses are going to be a big part of your trading. They're the only thing that are going to make you money. And you're going to learn more about that through the webinars and through a future psychology area within the portal. But this, in some cases, will be a normal loss. And this is an example, just based on quick base trades, of a loss that would occur. And simultaneously, right, this right here would be an example of a win, where you probably look at this as the MB, or one of these inside ones as the MB, just a quick one, and you take your entry, have your stop loss likely within this MB. In this case, you probably wouldn't throw it back here because it wouldn't make sense. And then on the next day, you probably sell half around here, and you trail the rest, and you probably get stopped out on this candle for the rest. And again, on a risk of around $10,000, just with some simple rules around management, this would have been, due to the way the price moved, about 1, 2, 3. So plus, that would be about plus 15K, 3, 4. And then this would be about plus like 20K, I believe. So, on a risk of 10K, just with some simple rules for management and the fact that price truly began to kind of take off and move quicker, this would be a gain of around, what is that, like plus 35K, 30K or so, plus 40K. On a risk of 10K, even though your system is based on quicker based MBs, right? So momentum based MBs, because these are higher up MBs that are coming up and setting up after price has started to push. And again, for some of you, that kind of style might be the style that you really prefer and that you really like. You want to get in as prices are truly proving themselves, making insane moves, and you get in quickly. You likely get out quickly on a lot of trades. You take a lot of break evens, a lot of tiny losses, a lot of tiny wins, and sometimes you get a tiny win that actually amounts for a big gain. Then you might take another loss up here, right? And then you take another trade, and then you take it. Maybe you get out, right? Then you take another one here. And then again, it becomes a beautiful runner, and you make a ton of money because again, these are those quicker based MBs off of continuations. So that's your little sidetrack for now on a faster based system of MBs. Not specifically that I'm entering them, because I don't sit here as a mentor pretending like I enter absolutely every market and make insane money from every single trade and every single move, because that's not what actually builds edge. I understand what builds edge for me, and what builds edge for me is following the rules around the things that I've studied and that I've tested. And I'm just simply giving you the blueprint that I understand that price moves from over and over and over again to give you the same ability to create a system for yourself. Nonetheless, let's go from here. Price flushes out, and it once again creates that stage 1 that creates the MBs here and starts another stage 2 higher. Goes into a stage 1 once again through the fact that you have a flush out, starts building up new MBs through the stage 1s and smaller fractal stage 1s, right? Stage 1s, stage 2s, stage 1s. This is another entry I'd probably consider, but for me already, this is still momentum based because it's taking off a little bit. So this might be one that I personally skip, but this does end up being a really good trade and does end up going, right? That does start creating again a stage 2. The stage 2 leads to another flush out, right? Now again, these flush outs can become major, but they don't. Instead, they start getting supported, and you might start noticing, because you will learn about this in the following parts of the portal. It gets supported again by the MAs or undercuts the MAs and starts to take off again, gets supported by the MAs or undercuts them and then takes off again. You flush out into the creation of what we assume to be probably a stage 1. That stage 1 leads to MB validations within price. Those MBs lead to takeoffs, right? That then create, those MBs lead to takeoffs that then, of course, create smaller and faster based MBs, smaller and faster based MBs, smaller and faster based MBs, some of which fail, as you can see right here. Smaller and faster based MBs, smaller and faster based MBs, right? That then lead to, again, a flush out. And in this case, right, as we draw this is a flush. This is your move higher. All of a sudden, the flush, for what we would expect the flush to come down to and maybe start a new move, ends up becoming what I would label probably as a major flush, right? Price goes into a more major flush, starts undergoing, as per the indicator, the anticipation of the higher low rule, or you can really use any. It doesn't really matter because all of them show the same thing. Anticipation of the higher low rule, that should lead to either a continuation to major flush out, right? Or should lead to the creation of a new stage 1. Now, in the case that stage 1s are being created, we assume this is now accumulation because, again, anticipation of major flush leads to anticipation of the higher low rule, which leads to accumulation, which leads to stage 1 creation, which leads to MB creation. MB creation leads to micro stage 1s and 2s, which create larger stage 1s into 2s. And from there should come a flush, as it does, that should lead to new stage 1s. And those stage 1s should lead to new MBs to create stage 2s, but then all of a sudden, no MBs get created. Instead, price falls down even harder. So then we assume that this stage 1 and 2, or this cycle, right? It's the number 3 example, where something begins and it gets interrupted by the fact that the trend is not going to occur. So you have the major flush into stage 1 to stage 2 into a flush, but then the flush didn't transfer into MBs that got built up to make a new stage 1 to go higher. Instead, it went back to the full cycle major flush. So if we go back down into here, so I kind of keep it on the left a little bit, right? We started looking at this, and then again, price started to fail down. So we understand we are still within a major flush. So we know the next step should be a stage 1 if it's going to start creating some kind of move, right? Stage 1 potentially starts getting created. Here it is. Stage 1 potentially starts getting created. You have the buildup of MBs. These start creating MBs. Price begins to start a stage 2 and fails. So now you're back in major flush territory. And from here, you expect that either stage 1 start getting created or price continues failing down. And all of a sudden, you go into major flush, right? And that major flush is all of this, which might become overall the anticipation of the higher low rule. Might become accumulation, as it probably looks like it did here. Goes through a potential stage one, which is made up of, as you all could guess, MBs into new MBs into momentum-based MBs, 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 all of which are, as we can all start to guess, the stage two creation, right? All made up of, once again, minor ones and twos, minor ones and twos, minor ones and twos, minor ones and twos, stage ones and twos after the major flush out, all happening here. And then all of a sudden, once again, you have a flush out in price. That is a flush out. Okay, this is likely creating the next stage one. From a flush out and through creation of a stage one, we start creating MBs. You have this MB, and then you have the buildup of this MB. And funny enough, because again, I want to be honest with everybody here, and I want you to learn how to actually build a skill set for yourself that you can rely on rather than sit here and show off and pretend like I'm doing something I'm not. This is an MB right here that I personally traded. This was actually a trade from today. At the time of recording this, this is the trade I personally took today. You can see I kind of labeled it for you guys just so you can see it as well, because I knew I was going to probably make a video on it. This is that trade I spoke about before that I've taken. Then you had that anticipation of the higher low rule met. Again, from any one of these lows doesn't really matter. Accumulation buildup, stage one. Stage two, I missed these MBs. Not really missed, but for certain reasons, I did not trade them, and we'll go over that later on. It's to do with the EVC that you're learning. Stage one to stage two. Stage one into what I assumed was going to start a stage two. So this morning, I took this entry through the high, and it simply failed. And I actually took a -1 on this, which is fine. Because if you start to understand, like you saw in the other examples, what trading actually looks like, and you start realizing on average what your actual trading looks like, you start to take losses and you accept losses with no issue whatsoever. So I just wanted to show that as a real example too, because, well, this is something I personally traded using the full cycle template of what I expected to be the move. Now, again, this might flush, right? Because that can easily happen. It can flush and start creating new moves for me. And those moves are the ones that I would once again look to trade. And then as it starts going higher, I know that minor ones and twos, ones and twos, ones and twos would start making price go higher, and that's someone else's edge. Or maybe even in the future, a potential area for me to add on or take small scalps into the position. But that's, again, another representation of the full cycle. And that's continued from what we saw right here, right? We ended up here. We started from there. We showed you what we would expect out of these major flushes. And those major flushes led to new stage ones, that led to new stage twos, that led to the exact setups that we normally look for. And there they are. Those major flushes did lead to the accumulation. Those accumulations led to stage ones. Stage twos made up of MBs, new mini flush outs, new creations, new setups, and continuations higher in trend, because those are all made up of those MBs that become validated and price moves and moves and moves. Then it fails to create new stage ones and does the exact same thing. And currently we are left off with live price right here. My expectancy is simply to keep following this thing in the event that the stage ones and twos continue to deliver and that new MBs get created to make the move go higher. And here we are. This is the live, right? As you can see here, those are the ones we saw tested. This is the one I personally traded, made beautiful money on that move. Then we went through this major flush out again. We started at stage one into stage two with MBs. Then again, you have these MBs as also potential MBs based on the person you are and the kind of system you trade, into a flush out, into what I assumed would be a new setup that didn't become a setup and instead took me out. And again, you are learning as we're doing this, not only the conceptual, but you're starting to see firsthand how to approach the psychological and the actual, like the actual life of a trader in terms of losses and wins, working together to make you money. Because all you're doing is you're executing the trend template on markets that are good within the realm of what you've studied or what makes the most sense to you and what actually what speaks to you as a trader, right? So that's some of the examples I've showcased, and you trade them. All right. Those are some of the examples here for the full cycle on just one asset. We'll look at some more shortly. Let's do it.